I'm calling the regular meeting of the Fairfield Planning Commission for April 13, 2022 to order. Mr. Feinstein, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Commissioner McDonald?
Present.
Commissioner Werblin?
Present.
Commissioner Smith? Here. Commissioner Evans?
Present.
Commissioner Cruzen?
Present.
Commissioner Childs is absent. And Commissioner Matthews?
Present. Okay. Commissioner Smith, would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. As way of introduction, persons wishing to address the Planning Commission on subjects not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission may do so, provided that no action may be taken on off-agenda items except as authorized by law. Off-agendized item from the public will be taken under consideration without discussion by the Commission and may be referred to staff. Comments will be accepted in person or via Zoom. To the public, if you wish to speak on an agenda item in person, please complete one of the speaker cards. You can hold that up, thank you. And give it to the front desk before the meeting, or at least prior to the time before the public comments on that item. When joining by via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature or press star 9 on your phone to request to speak. You'll be called on by name and will have 3 minutes to share your views. Next, we have approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are not.
May I have a motion to accept the agenda
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. May we have the vote by roll call? Mr. Feinstein, please.
Yes, Commissioner McDonald,
Yes.
Commissioner Werblin,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Evans,
Yes.
Commissioner Cruzen,
Yes.
Commissioner Childs,
Yes.
and Commissioner Matthews.
Yes. Next is approval of the minutes for the March 23rd, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. Are there any changes to the minutes? If not, may I have a motion to so approve them?
So moved.
And a second, please?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as submitted. Mr. Feinstein, will you please conduct the roll call vote?
Yes, Commissioner McDonald,
Yes.
Commissioner Werblin,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Evans,
Yes.
Commissioner Cruzen,
Yes.
Commissioner Childs,
Yes.
and Commissioner Matthews.
Yes. Okay, now we're ready for public comments. This is a time to speak on items not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. I now open the public comment period. Are there any persons wishing to speak in person or via Zoom on non-agendized item? Hearing none, I will close the public comment period. Now, the next item on the agenda is scheduled matters. For agendized item, there will be a presentation by city staff. For items that involve application requests, I will then ask the applicant to address the commission. Afterwards, I will open the public hearing via Zoom. I will close the public hearing after all comments have been provided and after all of our questions regarding testimony during the public hearing have been answered. After the public hearing is closed, the Planning Commission will deliberate on the item and may have additional questions for staff. No additional testimony or question from the public can be taken at that point. The first item is item A, a discussion about the environmental impact report for Green Valley 3 apartment project, focusing on the scope of the EIR, which is Environmental Impact Report. Our staff member is Mr. Jonathan Atkinson, and we also want to recognize and welcome you back to the Fairfield team.
Thank you.
And look forward to your presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Planning Commissioners. My name is Jonathan Atkinson, Senior Planner with the City of Fairfield. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to conduct a scoping session for the Environmental Impact Report, or EIR, for the proposed Green Valley 3 Apartments project. The project is a multifamily residential development with 185 apartments at 4840 Business Center Drive. The apartments will be located at a single building at 4 stories in height and will include a 2-story parking garage. An earlier version of this project came before the Planning Commission, and that earlier version included 268 apartments in a 5-story parking garage. That was in October 2021. That was part of an initiation hearing for a planned development overlay. The City Council also held an initiation hearing for the planned development overlay in November 2021. The applicant subsequently elected to redesign the project and is no longer pursuing the planned development overlay. The City Council did direct further study of the project, as you know. Tonight is an initiation of that study, and an EIR will be prepared to evaluate project-level impacts. This study session is an opportunity for the Planning Commission and members of the public to identify issues to be studied in the EIR. The study session is not intended to discuss the merits of the project, and no formal action will be taken at this time. Shabnam Bharati of Bharati Consulting is the EIR consultant and will be leading the scoping session meeting tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Shabnam Bharati, and I am the owner of Bharati Consulting. And Bharati Consulting and LSA have teamed together to prepare this EIR on behalf of the city. So I will, let me make sure I know how to operate this one. Yeah. So I'm going to walk through a few key things, the purpose of this scoping session for the benefit of people who are not here watching online so that they understand why we're doing this. A little bit about the project itself and the key elements of that project. And then we'll talk about the CEQA process, the scope of the EIR, so that people have an understanding of what to expect when, in this EIR, and then they can give us comments on the scope of the EIR. So with that, very briefly, the purpose of this session today is to invite comments on the scope of the environmental impact report that will be prepared. And we would like people who will be providing comments either here at this meeting or in writing via email or regular mail to concentrate on the key environmental issues of concern. That is the purpose of inviting these comments. We want you to tell us what would you like to see analyzed in the EIR. And also, if you have mitigation measures that you would like to suggest to us based on your current understanding of things, please put those forth as well, and give us your ideas about alternatives that the EIR should consider. That should be the focus. Briefly about the project, I think Jonathan may have referred to the location, but the location of the project is a 5.8 acre parcel that is located just north of the intersection of Green Valley Road with Business Center Drive, as shown on the graphic that is on our screen here. And the project, as again Jonathan explained, is a single building, which is a 200,000 square foot building. And I'm going to go to the site plan so that it's easy to understand. The tan or the brown shows the building component. And so it has 3 wings that extend out from a central area. And it contains 185 apartment units. It's 4 stories high, as proposed. Associated with the building, or as part of the complex, we have parking, which is provided along the periphery of the site, as you can see, as well as in a parking deck. It's a 2-story parking structure ground level and then one deck above. And then there are carports also. So for a total of 340 parking spaces are being provided. The project also includes other amenities for use by the residents, a clubhouse, pool, other areas for recreation use by the people who would reside there. The project has a green open space area along the creek. As you can see, it's shown in 2 shades of green. The darker green is an area that is being looked at for potential stormwater management, but in general, that area will be maintained as open space. And so those are the key elements of the site plan. Access to the site is still from Business Center Drive via an existing driveway that currently serves the commercial building to the right here. To the directionally, I'm challenged here, it's probably east. So that kind of describes the project. And as Jonathan...
I'm sorry, I don't like interrupting, but if you could go back one slide.
Sure.
I just have a quick question. I just want to clarify, make sure I'm in the same place here.
Yeah.
Actually, another slide back.
One more back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so right there in front of that yellow diagram is the hotel, right?
Correct.
Okay, so access to this is coming in on the side of the hotel and coming into the back portion, which will be the apartments, correct?
You got it,
Okay,
yes.
just wanted to clarify.
It's an existing driveway that is currently being used by the other building that's there. Is that, okay. I'll move on then. Yeah, I think I described all the key elements of the project, and we looked at the site plan. As Jonathan said, you know, the general plan designation for the site will need to be changed from what it is currently. It is Business Industrial Park. And the zoning designation will also require changes because it's not zoned for residential at this time. Now, a little bit about CEQA. I mean, a lot of people here are very familiar with what CEQA is, but I think the public in general might want to hear about it. CEQA is a state law, California Environmental Quality Act, which requires a lead agency such as the city of Fairfield to look at a discretionary project, such as this project, and evaluate its impacts to see whether it will result in significant impacts on the environment. And if there is a potential for significant impacts, then mitigation must be incorporated into the project in order to reduce those impacts, either to eliminate them or to reduce them to the extent feasible. So that is what is driving this process that the city is launching or has launched. After the receipt of the application from the applicant, the city reviewed the information and came to a determination that an EIR was needed. And so here we are, commencing the preparation of the EIR. Now, in conjunction with city staff, the consultants looked at all the possible areas that a project could affect, and this list consists of 20 elements, actually. There are 20 resource topics in the CEQA checklist, which is in Appendix G, that the state has given us guidance saying that these are the areas that a CEQA document should look at. And we went through all 20 of them and have made an initial evaluation and decided that the ones that are indicated in blue, such as aesthetics, air quality, biology, cultural resources, energy, GHG, hydrology, land use, noise, and transportation, all the blue ones we're going to look at in detail because they warrant a detailed analysis. The ones that are indicated in the paler gray color, we feel that they likely will not need a detailed analysis. It's not that we are not going to look at them, we are, and we are going to include them in the EIR, except that the level of detail of analysis we expect would be more limited. Again, this needs to be done and demonstrated, but this is our current evaluation of the scope of the EIR. And like any other EIR, we will first characterize what the existing conditions are with respect to the site and the resources that are present there. Then we will identify the significance criteria that we are going to use to evaluate impacts. We will conduct the analysis, And then having conducted the analysis, we will evaluate the impact in terms of whether or not it would be significant. And to the extent the impact is significant, we will put forth mitigation measures. So that is, in a nutshell, the sections. And then, in addition, CEQA requires a consideration and evaluation of alternatives in an EIR. And they need to be able to attain most of the objectives of the project. In other words, they should be feasible alternatives, and they should have the ability to reduce the significant impacts of the project. With that guidance, we are going to identify alternatives and then evaluate them in detail. And there may be some that we will not look at in detail because they don't meet the objectives of the project. That work will be done. A no project alternative will be looked at. Fine. This is a little bit about the process as it goes for CEQA. Do we have something that I can use to, oh, never mind. I was wondering how I could point to things. So here's the process. We start with the application that was received by the city and reviewed, and a determination was made that an EIR will be prepared. We are here, step 3 in the process. We are scoping the EIR at this time. An NOP, Notice of Preparation for the EIR, was published on the 17th of March, and it went out for 30 days. So it closes on the 18th of April. People will have these 30 days to look at the NOP and then provide comments to the city in terms of what the EIR should look at. This meeting is also for the same purpose. People who are here will have an opportunity to provide oral comments. So when the 30-day scoping period ends, we will take all the comments that are received and consider them in the preparation of the EIR. And this is the next step that we are going to be in. We are working on the EIR. We will look at the scoping comments. We will draft an EIR. Once an admin draft is prepared, we will give it to the city for its review, because city is the lead agency. And if city approves of the document, it will be published. This is that publication point. Once it's published, it's out for 45 days. And during that 45 days, there will be another meeting like this before the Planning Commission to comment on the draft EIR itself. After you folks have reviewed the document, you'll get another chance to comment on it. And then once that 45-day period ends, we will get into what is called the preparation of the final EIR. We will take those comments that are received and prepare a response to comments document and a final EIR, and that final EIR will be published. And finally, that will come again before the Planning Commission first, and then secondarily, it'll go to the City Council. But final approval, of course, rests with the City Council. Then a little bit about the timelines. These are approximate at this time. We started, the NOP came out on the 17th. We're doing the scoping session today. It ends on the 18th, the scoping period. Then we'll be drafting the document over the summer, and we expect late summer, fall is when we would be completing the process for the draft. And then it'll go for approvals. We are currently targeting winter, early 2023. Okay. And finally, this is my last slide. So I think now you want to open it to public comment. And again, this reiterates what we would want you to comment on. Should I do that? With that, I think. Okay. With that.
Before we open public comment, we'll have discussion with the commissioners. So questions or items that you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, I was curious on the factors. I think you said there were 20 factors overall, and the ones that were selected seemed reasonable, but I think there were a few that I was concerned that they weren't going to have thorough analysis, because a lot of the feedback that I've had of people in the area have talked a lot about the impact of housing and, what that's going to do to, whether it be traffic, schools, a lot of different things. But it did seem to me that population and housing, public services, the impact of public services would be significant, or could be significant, at least seem like they would warrant maybe more analysis. And furthermore, I think out of Solano County, probably the area outside of Vacaville is like one of the most severe fire hazards, but I think, in Green Valley, there is also significant fire hazards in the county, so I was wondering if you could maybe address that a little more.
Yes, I can. So I agree with you that at first blush, some of the topics appear as though they may not need a detailed analysis, but as we get into it, we realize that more is needed. Then it might turn out to be a full-fledged, like a complete section of the EIR, as opposed to a subsection, right? The concept right now in our minds was that for topics that are not important, let's take agriculture or mineral resources, those are obvious ones, right? Those will not require a very lengthy analysis. But some of them are more marginal, like you said, population and housing and public services. So if we find that there is more to be done there, then it'll have its own independent section in the EIR with a complete setting section and impact analysis. We haven't done the work yet, so I cannot say, but this was our first take. Wildfire is true. I mean, that's such an issue these days everywhere, right? So we will be very careful with that topic, absolutely. And currently, there are two places where evacuation and wildfire are addressed. I think evacuation is the bigger issue in most people's mind. And we are currently planning to take care of it or address it, let's say, in transportation section of the EIR. Because otherwise, the project site is not in a high hazard area in itself, but because there could be evacuation issues or concerns, let's say that, we were going to deal with it under transportation. But again, we can look at the CEQA checklist questions and make sure that it doesn't, if it does rise to a level where it needs a full-blown analysis, we will do so.
Commissioner, I had two questions. I didn't see emergency access outside of just the primary entrance to that complex. What happens when one of those buildings is burning down and 400 residents are trying to get in their cars and get out, and trucks are trying to get in on that two-lane entrance?
That analysis will be in the document because that question has been raised even by others in the city. So we will have that in the EIR. There are other ways out, but since this is only a scoping session, I don't want to assume or tell you something about the analysis, which I haven't done yet.
Right. I guess my concern there is seeing the development. I know that when you come in, you have some entrances this way from the other parking lot. But typically in a development like that, you would have some other entrances and exits, or even an emergency fire entrance that would allow for emergency services. And I just didn't see anything that really met that.
There are exits via here as well, just so that it's kind of hard to see here.
Right, that goes out into the business center parking lot, right? But there's other buildings and so forth.
Yeah,
are all being
because there is a
developed.
route out from here as well as here. So every car doesn't have to come out this way, but again, this is a topic that that has been identified, actually, and brought to our attention.
And this might be more of a question for Dave and staff, and I may be jumping the gun on there, but why are we entertaining putting apartments in a place that really should be like an ideal business center? Like a commercial business center where insurance agencies and companies would all just be in there.
So the straight answer to your question is, why are we entertaining it? Because an application has been submitted to the city, and because there's an application that's submitted, we have to entertain it. The
So that's an
decision
important
about
point,
the
'cause
decision about what a recommendation will be to the planning commission, decisions by the planning commission or the city council, those are later down the road. So tonight, we're not entertaining anything, but we are obligated to process the application.
And that's more to my question. I just wanted clarification on that so that we all understand that this isn't, we didn't go out and seek the applicant. The applicant came to the city and said, hey, I have this great idea. I think this would work back here, right? And although it's not zoned for that area, we can't just rubber stamp a no on it and say, sorry, it's not zoned for that. We can't entertain that. We still have to go through the process.
Correct. You have to go through that's exactly right. You have to go through the process, and the environmental analysis is a part of that process. And we, staff looked at this. We, in discussion with the applicant, we all concluded that, yeah, the highest level of environmental review and environmental impact report is the right process for this to go through as a part of at least that component. So.
Thank you, Dave. And thank you, Commissioner Matthews, for the time. Appreciate it.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
Yes, I actually have a question. If we go back to the slide with the scope categories,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, so I can understand it. All the categories that are going to be thoroughly examined, do you already have the topics for that? And if so, we're just adding additional topics to it tonight? Or are we exploring some of the topics that already have come up, particularly surrounding land use and planning? 'Cause I was curious, like, for instance, like, what are some of the issues that you would be addressing under that?
Under land use and planning specifically. In order to look at any of these topics, all 20 of them, what we typically do, and this is done in all jurisdictions, you would not be unique, right? What we do is we go to the CEQA checklist, which is Appendix G of the guidelines, and that checklist has a series of questions that it asks. Would the project cause XYZ? In the case of land use, it has, I believe, 2 questions, and I wish I had the guidelines with me, but it really focuses on would the project be compatible with the general plan or I can get you the verbiage from the guidelines in a minute.
Sorry, y'all, making you work tonight.
No problem. I don't have a slide to put up there, which would make it easier. But for land use, CEQA checklist has only 2 questions. The first one is, will the project physically divide a community? So are you putting something that will divide a community? That is number 1. And the second one is, will the project cause a significant environmental impact due to a conflict with a land use plan, policy, or regulation adopted for the purpose of avoiding or mitigating an environmental impact? So that is the question that we expect to answer in the land use section of the EIR. That we are planning to, not expect, we are planning to answer that question.
Okay.
Does that help?
It does help, and because I just didn't want to be redundant in the things that we talk about. So it would almost be easier if we could see, like, some of the questions for some of the categories, because then we wouldn't be redundant in bringing up the same things.
That is true.
I'm just going to use my imagination. Thank you.
Yeah. All of them have accompanying questions from the checklist. And we intend to answer all of those questions in the CEQA document we do.
And I have just a question. What determines, is there like a criteria that determines which one gets the gray cut, which one gets the blue cut?
Oh, when we did the initial evaluation, we just based it on the project description and our own experience with projects, that these are the types of areas where we expect potentially significant impact. I'm not saying that there will be significant impact in every of the blue category, but at our first review, that's what we felt. Again, because the analysis needs to be done to show one way or the other, right? We cannot say. And for that reason, the gray ones are going to be looked at, but may or may not be issues that elevate to a detailed analysis. For instance, hazardous materials, right? The site is undeveloped. There potentially will be no hazardous materials on site to be concerned about. Same thing with minerals. There are none in the area, so we wouldn't be concerned. Same thing with ag and forestry resources. The land is, vacant, no trees, nothing, and there is a riparian corridor, but the project is staying out of that. So those are that's where we were coming from.
Ms. Barati, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Would you please go back to the process time slide?
Yeah.
No, the one just before that.
One before that? Yeah.
So I just want to emphasize for commissioners and the public that this is one of many opportunities to give input, ask questions, and probe and request additional studies. So this is simply what we're doing here tonight, trying to get the broad brush. Am I
You're
saying
totally
that
right.
correctly?
Yes, this is the first scoping session, and I don't think we have more planned, but it's up to your discretion. If you needed more, we could. But CEQA doesn't ask for more than one scoping session, so we're complying with it. And the purpose is really to tell the people about what the project is, to the, as we understand it to be today, and I think it's pretty complete in terms of the project description we have here. So it's reasonable that if somebody takes the time to look at the project in detail, they should be able to come up with their concerns. And this is supposed to guide them in terms of what they should be commenting on.
But the point that I'm trying to emphasize is that once you've prepared the report, there'll be a review process.
Absolutely.
During that review process, there'll be a significant amount of information that the public and others can comment on, and then there may be revisions at that point or additional requests for information.
You're totally right. That is the purpose of the draft EIR. It is always a draft EIR that gets published, and so people have a chance to look at the real analysis. Today, I can just say, oh yeah, we're going to look at air quality impacts, but you don't know how we're going to do it, what the details are, right? So once that gets published, then you will be able to see exactly how we did the work and whether or not you're convinced with the analysis, right? And then if we find impacts, have we come forth with mitigation? All of those things need to be looked at. So yes, once the draft gets published, people will have more to comment on than at the current time.
Right. Other questions, comments, concerns?
Okay.
So are we ready to open the public hearing? Okay.
And it's not a hearing tonight,
public-
it'll be a comment period. Yeah.
Okay, I now open the public comment period, and we have 6 or so green cards. If there are any in the public that have not completed one of these and would like to speak, please do so. The first one I have in front of me is Carol Cherkovink. Okay, please come forward, and we look forward to hearing you for up to 3 minutes.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, thank you first for allowing me to speak. The environment consists of the surroundings or the conditions in which a person, an animal, or a plant lives or operates. It's also the natural world or in a particular geographic area that's affected by human activity. So there's actually 3 types of environments. It's natural, and it's physical, and it's human. I didn't see anything on that map in blue or gray about the human element. Per the AP Special Studies Zone Act of 1972, the site should have a geological study in addition to the EIR because of the proximity of the Green Valley Fault, which is, we know, the easternmost strike-slip fault of the larger San Andreas fault system. This is a natural concern. The geological study should contain the distance of the proposed building to the fault trace and outline the mitigation of hazards, both physical and human, with a fault rupture or a fault creep. There's only one way to turn on Business Center Drive when you're exiting, and that's heading westbound towards Green Valley Road. This prevents crowding of 2 already overcrowding intersections. It's Green Valley Road with Business Center Drive, and it's Nisol Road with Business Center Drive. How will this physical concern be addressed? The shared road between the hotel and the proposed building creates traffic overcrowding and safety concerns. That's another human element. As a result, an emergency use of the road, as we heard earlier, could be restricted and very limited. There would also likely be more fender benders as people are trying to leave for work on time in the morning, as drivers have to wait in line to exit that road. How would this physical concern be addressed? The site faces the rear of the hotel, where hotel garbage bins will likely be stored, creating unsanitary environmental concerns. Additionally, there are homeless individuals in and around the proposed site within the fall foliage who are prone to searching for items in garbage bins and who may leave their own garbage around the proposed site. So how will this human concern be addressed? Finally, on the map that was proposed of how the process works, I did not see an alternative to not adopt the proposal, because that is one of the options that needs to be considered. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Carol, for your comments. Next, we have Arnold Jocelyn, and then after that, Nora Dizzen. Please.
Good evening again. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm Dr. Arnold Josselson. I've lived in Green Valley for about 25 years, and I think this project has the potential to substantially degrade the quality of our environment. I think to me, the main problem is going to be traffic. I would ask any of you to come out at 8 o'clock in the morning on a school day. The intersection of Business Center Drive and Green Valley Road, it's Carmageddon. And this is before that monstrosity called Nova has opened, and before this project would open. And the population of Green Valley, as close as I could tell now, is 1,500 people. These two apartment complexes are going to add about another 1,000 people, so in a very small area. I think that's the big problem. It's such a small area. And I think wildfire should be in blue, not in gray. We live there, and if there was a wildfire, we'd have to get the hell out of there. And with more cars, it's going to be a tragedy, I believe. As far as mitigation, the only way to mitigate this is better roads and more roads. And I don't know if the city is prepared to bear the expense of that, but to me, the big problem is so many people, so many cars in a small area with terrible traffic right now. It can only get worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jocelyn. Nora, please come forward. After Nora, we'll have Douglas Smith.
Good evening, Chairman Matthews, other commissioners, city staff, and everyone else here. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Back in 2016, 2017, when I started to get involved with this process, I spoke to Joe Lucio, who was the planning manager back then. And we discussed a project, the Haven Hill Apartments, not yet constructed. It's an approved project for the Sino Company. And at the time, it had 324 units approved, and it was expected to increase to 378. And we discussed this, and he said, well, if they do that, though, it would have to come back to the Planning Commission because it is a material change. So, understanding that as a very key factor, I don't understand why we are here tonight, seeing the start of an EIR scoping meeting when there has been a material change in this project. You've got an 83 unit change, 268 was the original number of units. Now, it's a welcome change, but it is a very significant change. Therefore, the approval that this is being used to proceed on this is faulty. You need to go back. It needs to come back here first to the Planning Commission. If they pass it, that's one thing, but then it still has to go to the City Council. They need to review this once again in its changed parameters. This is no longer the same project that was approved. You know, you cannot skip steps like that. It is illegal. Also, with the notice could have easily been sent to all the people who are interested in this project together with the notice of this scoping meeting. But no, it wasn't. It was simply published in the paper, and you have 30 days from then. Well, I'm sorry. So if we didn't discover that, we wouldn't know that we have only 4 days to respond, not 30 days. We have 4 days.
Nora, I apologize, but there are about 5 seconds left.
No, I hear you, but you got my point. You're skipping steps here. This is illegal. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Nora. We'll have staff address the issue of that process after we complete other comments. So, Mr. Smith, please come forward, and then Sonia Medding. Apologies for butchering names here.
Hi, good evening, Commission. First question I have is, I just want to clarify what Mr. Feinstein said. Is it required that we accept the responsibility of entertaining a project from a developer, even though the general plan does not have that area zone for that project? We still have to accept that? Is that in our charter? That is a requirement? That's law? We have to accept that? We can't tell the developer, sorry, it's not zoned for that. We cannot entertain that project here. Is that true? Because this is going to get legal, so I want to make sure that we have us all lined up. So,
do you want to address that now or wait until?
We'll address this. Okay, all righty.
Okay. Any other comments?
So I want to make sure I go back to the plan here too, is that, a Business Center Drive, Green Valley Road, that intersection there is really the only exit point for the entire neighborhood of Upper Green Valley, Middle Green Valley, and Green Valley. And they have to exit through there. And this project we're proposing a study to be done. And I'm not sure if everyone's aware that there's another large complex being built right now that's not completed just down the road. The other, 200 and something apartments that are being built. And is this study going to include the traffic impact of those apartments? Wouldn't you have to wait until those apartments are completed and it's populated before you go through another scoping? Well, I mean, doesn't that make sense? It's logical. I'm an engineer. This is what would be required in my company. So we need to consider that. How can we even move forward with scoping this project when we have another huge development, and not including the 3 large warehouses, right? That's going to bring truck traffic into the area. So, I mean, I think we're just really overpopulating the area. And we aren't thinking through and planning correctly, because from a logical perspective, this does not fit in this area, this Green Valley 3 apartments. The Green Valley 2 apartments didn't fit in this area either. That was another PD overlay that got by us. But these PD overlays, they have to stop. They have to stop. We can't keep doing this. It's destroying the quality of life out there, for one thing, and it's making it a dangerous situation.
Thank you. 3 minutes are up. We appreciate your comments, and I think all of us that either live, work, or visit that area understand the issues of transportation as being very important. Sonia?
Well, thank you for allowing me to speak. I think everything that I wanted to say has been said before, today and previous. My concerns is really the highest and best use of this property. It's zoned right now for commercial use. I think that the general plan, when the city had a general plan, saw that it would be the best use for this area to have commercial use. And I agree with that. I think what Fairfield needs, and as a rule, is two things, right? We do need housing, yes, but we also need jobs for people who live here. And people have to commute right now an hour and a half to their jobs, and wouldn't it be wonderful if they could work near where they live? And I think that in looking at the environment and everything else, we all know that the traffic is terrible. We would need more policing. So that has to be part of the public services. We also need more schools to handle these people. There would be, and also that it backs a creek area that has to be impact to the environment too, but mostly we need jobs, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and for coming out. That concludes all the green cards that I have. Do we have anybody on Zoom interested in speaking?
It does not look like we do. If anybody, this is your chance. If you're on Zoom and you'd like to provide any comment, use the raise your hand function. And we're not seeing any hands.
All right. So at this point, we'd like to invite staff to respond. Give me clarification. Do I need to close the public comment period, or is this part of it?
You can close the public comment.
I should close that now. Okay, so the public comment period is now closed, and we invite staff to respond to some of the concerns that have been raised.
Yeah, so the basic, we heard a collection of issues that are environmental issues that are absolutely valuable input on things that are of concern for the neighborhood that we should study in the environmental impact report. And so we're taking notes. All of those comments on issues that are within the realm of the EIR we'll make sure get addressed, including your comments. Some of the comments, though, weren't necessarily about the substance of the EIR itself, but more process. And I want to clarify, I heard a few words here, and I want to clarify a few things with the commission as well as those who spoke. You'll recall that this item actually came before you last November, maybe October. We held a public hearing. That was actually an unusual event for a project like this. It's extremely rare that the commission holds a hearing and takes some action at the very beginning of the process. Normally, that's all the way at the very end. What was happening at that time is the original version of this project would have been built at a density greater than any zoning designation that we have here in the city. So we didn't have a standard zoning district to apply to this project. The only way that such project could get built here in the city is if we applied what we call a planned development overlay, and we heard that term in one of the comments, on this site on a lower base zone. And that planned development overlay can allow certain things to happen that without it you can't. And one of the things that we were looking to do is to find a process for the Planning Commission and City Council to consider a density greater than any that we have in our base zones. So this was an unusual circumstance. What's happened since that time is that the applicant has modified the project so that we actually do have base zoning, our very high-density residential zone that can accommodate the proposal, so that if the Planning Commission or City Council wish to approve the project, you simply apply the zoning that's already in existence. And when we have a zone that's already in existence for the project, there is no process that says you have to look at this and initiate that action at the very beginning. You'll recall that the commission looked at it and actually chose not to initiate it. The city council, the applicant then asked the city council, and the city council said, yeah, we'd like to initiate that planned development zoning, and they said, we would like to study this project, which is the action before us tonight. So because this project has changed in a way that eliminates the need for that initial hearing, we're now, what we have essentially is a normal type application. And to get to one of the other questions, applicants are allowed to apply to amend our general plan. We actually have an application, general plan amendment, for this very reason. General plans are not considered fixed in perpetuity from the moment the city council adopts them. The law does give the opportunity, and our city code does give the opportunity for landowners or anybody to come in and propose an amendment to our general plan, and that's exactly what's included here. Doesn't mean that the city has to approve it, but once we do get that application, we are obligated to process it and study it and consider it. We're not allowed to just sit on it forever and do nothing. So what we're doing tonight is essentially a higher level of environmental review than we typically do. Most projects don't rise to the level of an environmental impact report, but the other aspects of this project fall within relatively normal range of actions that the Planning Commission and Council look at: general plan amendments, development, entitlement, things like that. So process is exactly what's normal and required for this. We haven't skipped steps. We're not doing anything illegal. And this is, and in fact, the law says the moment you determine that an EIR is the right level of review, that's when you must start the scoping for the project. You must start looking at what are the issues. So we're actually following the law precisely. So.
Thank you. Jonathan, anything you want to add?
I also wanted to add regarding concerns with respect to the EIR scoping session meeting notice. That notice did go out to property owners within proximity of the project site. It actually went beyond what we typically do for public meeting notices. Also wanted to note that there was an interested persons list, and that consisted of folks who have requested to be notified of public meetings. They received the copy of the notice, and there were also persons who attended the earlier initiation hearing back in October and November, and those persons also received a mailed copy of the EIR scoping meeting notice. And it did include a link to the notice of preparation. It's a 11-page document, so we couldn't easily put it into envelopes to mail out, but there was a link, and shortly after that notice went out, we started receiving some comments, so folks in the community were aware shortly after that notice period commenced.
And you might also acknowledge you probably received at least 20 emails or so from interested persons?
That's correct. I do want to acknowledge that we did receive about 30 comments. Some of those comments were about the merits of the project. Some identified some concerns and issues that we've heard tonight. We aren't taking formal action on the project, so that was noted that merits of the project aren't under discussion at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, any additional questions or comments that you'd like to make before we move on?
Are we making comments on this now? Is that what you're asking for?
Yes.
Okay. So I had a couple of things I wanted to just clarify. I'm assuming that because there are natural hazard reports that exist when we transfer property in cities, states, and counties, that there is already a geological study that would be used in place of understanding where the fault lines are and what the property is sitting at and the degree of risk on that already, without having to actually go in and do a different geological study on top of that?
He's asking if there are existing studies.
Yeah.
Commissioner McDonald, can you repeat that question? Sorry.
Yeah, I just, and forgive me, I like to ask questions sometimes just to make sure that everybody understands the process more so. But in real estate, when we transact a property or make a transaction in a sale of a property, we are required to do what they call a natural hazard report, which includes an entire geological survey of the area that tells us fault lines, fire hazards, all of that stuff. I'm assuming that in this case, that property has a similar report that's already been conducted, which is why there's not a need for a new geological study to be done in order to ascertain what the risk might be in putting that property there.
At this point, we have a geotechnical study that also gives us information about the risks from various geologic hazards in the area. We do have that.
Okay.
Can you put the slide up that shows a broader area there?
Yeah. This is the best we have.
Okay, it doesn't quite show as much, but my understanding is a fault line runs basically in between the two 100,000 square foot warehouse buildings. So while, as noted earlier, it is very close and a concerning issue, we dealt with that issue during the approval of those warehouses.
Yeah, I was just looking for clarification as to whether or not there was a study in place, already been done, or what have you, just to answer that question. And I think, you know, we live in California, and I see those reports every day, and show me a house in California that's not next to a fault line. It just exists everywhere. Population in Green Valley is not 1,500. It's probably closer to 30,000 as far as all the residents and people that live out here. If we waited, nothing would get done. It's simply impossible to tell a developer or an applicant that we have to wait till everything is completely built and done before we can move forward with the next project. I am assuming when you do these studies, an ERI study identifies the risks today and the potential risks tomorrow, given future projects and the impact that those projects would have. So we're not necessarily waiting for this project to be finished. We can already understand what the impact of that project is going to be and add that into the information data we're going to get, which really is what this study's about, correct?
Yeah, I believe the comment was made in the context of transportation or traffic.
Right.
I believe that was the nature. And the traffic analysis will take into account traffic from existing projects plus foreseeable development or approved development specifically. That absolutely gets counted in. Then anything else that's foreseeable is also accounted.
To that point, may I interrupt just for a moment? And it might be good to have clarification of the changes of how traffic studies are conducted now.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, but I will let Dave say.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so just for everybody's benefit, the CEQA guidelines were revised, I want to say about 2 years ago now, and they now require the traffic analysis to focus on what is called vehicle miles traveled. In other words, if the project goes in, will it increase the number of miles that people will be driving in, and will it change that number for the city of Fairfield? Because Fairfield, existing conditions, we have a certain amount of traffic and therefore vehicle miles traveled. That is the new metric, and it is focused on not on congestion. Unfortunately, the previous metric we used to use was called level of service, and level of service was focused on analyzing whether a given intersection would be congested and how much more the project would cause in terms of congestion. That is no longer an environmental impact under CEQA. The city does have a separate process for looking at that, and the study is being completed and will be available, but it will be outside the review of CEQA. It will not be a CEQA study, but it will be available on the congestion analysis.
And Dave, that is being conducted and will be made available in
Yeah.
concurrent with this project coming to a conclusion?
Yeah, so by law, as Shabnam mentioned, we can't include that in the EIR. It's not, the state now says impacts on intersections are not environmental impacts.
Right, because we can all understand that if you put 100 more cars in this building and they're all still going to drive the same mile and a half to the freeway, that's going to create a lot more concerns, but no more miles,
Yeah.
right?
So what we'll see is, if you look in our general plan, we still do have standards in our general plan for how intersections perform. The same standards that we used to include in a CEQA document. So rather than in the environmental impact report and having it as an analysis in that document, what you'll do is you'll receive that when this project comes before the Planning Commission for entitlement as a part of the general plan consistency analysis. So we'll be looking to see, are the impacts on our intersections consistent with what our general plan allows or not? So it'll be essentially the same analysis. It'll just get considered in a different way as a part of a general plan consistency rather than as an environmental impact. So you won't see it in the EIR, but you will see it as a part of the entitlement documents for you.
Okay. The final comment I have really is just to point out that this is just an EIR at this point. We're not making any decisions to approve the project, and it doesn't really matter if you want the project or don't want the project. The EIR study is supposed to reveal the high risks and/or whether or not the project would fit in, and we'll have to see that. I would like to say, just to caution in general, as I said this before when I sat on the Planning Commission, having spent a considerable amount of my time in Solano County living in Green Valley, I can tell you that it's one of the most precious resources we have in our community as far as a great community to live in, work in, go to school in, and shop in. And I know that we have always wrestled with putting more homes in to attract more retail and more business that would be available there. But I also caution that we have this huge traffic problem that has developed over time with all of this development that is simply out of the city's control. And there's not much we can do about that except figure out a way to get the state of California to understand that there has to be another on-ramp put out there off of the Pittman area on the other side over Nitzel where they can get on, and that way traffic can go this way. And until that happens, I caution the city on approving these types of projects, which do create more congestion. Although one could argue that if you put in a business center, you're still going to have another 150, 200 cars coming to work and back every day there. So that's always going to be a problem. So I feel like we have to find a solution, and I still believe that solution is traffic, and that is going to require us figuring out how we put pressure on the state to make that happen, because that's been something that's been talked about for, as long as I've been around this commission. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments, questions? Please.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
This is Commissioner Werblin.
Yes, please.
Ms. Parati, can you talk about, there was some comments about school and overpopulation in the school district. What CEQA category would that fall under? Would that be public services?
Yeah, it would be public services because that covers fire, police, schools. So yes, that would be appropriate. And the CEQA question is, again, I'm going to borrow the checklist here, that with regard to public services, the question is that would the project result in substantial physical adverse impacts associated with providing, say, more or expanded schools? So the question is really not, if a school is at capacity and a project adds students, then it begs the question, how is the school going to deal with that, with those students, and would it need to add school facilities? And if the school comes back and says, no, we're going to absorb them anyway, then it's not a CEQA impact, because the CEQA impact is really focused on environmental impacts from building facilities to provide these services. Does that help?
It does. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo part of what Commissioner McDonald said is, the infrastructure should be first, and then the projects come after that, when I think then the community would be more comfortable accepting some of these projects rather than a whole litany of different concerns, whether it be housing, traffic, schools, and whatnot. And I am a little disappointed, well, not a little disappointed, I'm very disappointed that we weren't able to get to the general plan and make a comprehensive plan for accommodating such a significant impact to the community. And so I'm hoping that we do a thorough analysis and can make a really thorough decision. But I do hope that we can address, maybe get ahead of some of these things when we do the general plan, whether it be, I think Dave, you mentioned it, as far as things that can be addressed in the general plan to sort of set the table for what can and can't be done, and maybe avoid some of these head on in the future.
Thank you. Please.
Quick question about the vehicle miles traveled. When you talk about the vehicle miles traveled, are we going to also take a look at vehicle miles traveled in relation to the lack of retail and services in that particular area? So when you consider like vehicle miles traveled, I know we often we look at commute times, but does that include the impacts of that particular area? Doesn't really have a lot of retail, and it doesn't have some services like a post office and things like that.
The way that analysis is done, and I cannot say, but we'll take your comment and I'll take it to the traffic engineer to make sure that I'm not misspeaking here. But the way that analysis is done, it uses a model that takes into account the location of not just workplaces and these residences, as they will be, but also places where people would go to shop and things like that. So it takes the mileage into account, those trips also into account, not just the trips to work and home, but also trips to other places, such as for shopping. So which would kind of take into account your concern that if there is nothing nearby, the trip length would be longer in order to get what people need, right? So, but don't take my word on this right now, because I'm going to take this comment to the traffic engineer and make sure that what I said today is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? If not, we sincerely appreciate the community coming out and sharing your views, and want to assure you all and any that are listening that those are taken very seriously and appreciated for the passion that you show for our community. With that, we've already closed the public comment period, so now we move forward to director report.
Yeah, so several items, and one we touched on just very briefly when Jonathan gave his presentation. I did want to introduce Jonathan Atkinson. Yeah, you're welcome to pop back up. Excuse me. Jonathan had been with us for, close to 3 years. Several years ago, as an associate planner, left to take a promotional position elsewhere, but we were very happy to welcome him back as a senior planner. Jonathan, I don't know if I'm speaking for him, but he enjoyed working here and wanted to come back, and we had room, so wanted to welcome Jonathan back. So.
Just wanted to say briefly, look forward to working with you all, and I'm very happy to be back in Fairfield. And also just moved to Fairfield a few months ago, so yeah, I'm just really happy to be here.
Did you move to Green Valley?
Lower gas prices.
I did not.
So that's one staff transition I want to mention. The second is that Casey Strong, who is our normal, regular city attorney who sits here with us, is leaving the law firm that provides attorney services for us, is taking one of her dream jobs. So we're very happy for her, but what that means is Casey won't be with us. So we are, for at least for the time being, we're welcoming back Indra Khalsa, who Indra and I go back a long ways, sitting at this location many years. Our former city attorney for the Planning Commission. And so for at least the time being, until we get new staff on board with Richards Watson, you'll be with us, I think. Is that
That's
correct?
right. So good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Indra Khalsa, and I think I am familiar with a few of the current commissioners, but I'm really excited to get to know the full commission now. I've actually staffed this commission off and on, you won't believe it, since 2005. So it's really nice to be back, and I love this community, and it's been, it'll be great to work with my old colleagues in the planning department again. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to have David just share my contact information so that you can email me if you have any issues coming up with maybe potential conflicts of interest or any other questions that you have about our pending meetings. I'm happy to help. It's very nice to be here tonight.
A couple of other items. Let's see. For a couple of our new commissioners, I know Commissioner Smith and Commissioner Werblin, when you came on board, I wanted to give you a handbook that we normally give out to new commissioners that's published. It's called the Planning Commissioner's Handbook that provides lots of guidance. I wasn't able to give you an actual copy because they were in the process of updating that document. Just got word today that the Planning Commissioner's Handbook, which dates back at least to 2005 since the last update, that update is now completed. It's now an online document, and so I'm going to be forwarding out to all the commissioners the current, much more modern Planning Commissioner's Handbook. I'm happy to speak with any of you about any Planning Commission items, any questions that you might have coming out of that document. Let's see, general plan update. So as you know, we're in the alternatives phase, and we met with the Planning Commission many months ago to talk about some of the alternatives and get your input. We've met with the City Council, who asked that staff slow the process down and hold multiple workshops with the council on various alternatives for the general plan. We held a workshop, I'm going to say in March, on alternatives for the Cordelia area, and the City Council asked that we provide some greater outreach to the Cordelia area, speak more with residents of Cordelia, get input on their vision and things that they're concerned about with Cordelia. Obviously, that's very much the topic of discussion for tonight. So I wanted to let the commission know, as well as any members of the public who are watching, that there will be a workshop for Cordelia residents, or any interested people in what happens in Cordelia, on April 28th. That will be, I believe that's a Thursday, at 6 p.m. If somebody could confirm that that's a Thursday. But it's April 28th at 6 p.m. at the Cordelia Library. It's a Thursday.
Yes, it is a Thursday, Dave.
Thank you. Yes. So 6 p.m. It'll run from 6 to 7:30. It'll be open house style. We'll have a collection of exhibits and displays on the general plan, multiple staff there, and we'll be soliciting input on what Cordelia residents are interested in, what's missing, what do you like about Cordelia, what do you not like. We've heard a number of those topics discussed tonight. This will be a much more in-depth opportunity for folks to come in and talk to staff and our general plan consultants on Cordelia to help us better plan for that area. And certainly we've heard some suggestions tonight about what can make Cordelia better. And as Commissioner Smith mentioned, having that broad vision for Cordelia certainly can be helpful, and that's what we want to work on with the folks out in that area. And the 28th meeting will be a great opportunity to provide further input on that topic. The last item I want to mention is just an update for your next meeting. We do have multiple items scheduled for your next meeting in 2 weeks, so be prepared to come for that. And one of the items will be, and I think I mentioned it at your last meeting, we'll be asking the commission to appoint for another 2-year period a representative to the Community Development Block Grant Advisory Committee. Currently, your chairperson, Commissioner Matthews, sits on that committee, and I think Commissioner Werblin is a public member.
That is correct.
If Commissioner Werblin, if you're still on as a public member, you obviously can't serve in both seats, so we'd be looking for the commission to nominate one of the other 6 members. Could be Commissioner Matthews again, if you're interested, but if others are interested as well. So if you have questions about the CDBG Advisory Committee, I think either of your other 2 commissioners can give you direct input on what it's like, and we'll have some additional information for you out in your staff report for that item. So with that, we'll conclude my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Feinstein. I'll just comment that I have received some interest from members of the commission. If others would also be interested, please let either Mr. Feinstein or me know. Just as a quick follow-up to Commissioner McDonald's comment about Neitzel Road, we talked many months ago about maybe having an agenda item at some future meeting where we talk about not only that, but the 680 interchange. And I know, time is precious, but as the opportunity comes up, I just want to highlight that I think would be very appropriate, especially as we get into more discussions.
Yeah, what I can do is I'll reach out to staff at the Solano Transportation Authority. They've come here before this commission, might have been while Commissioner McDonald was on the commission previously, but probably none of you, to give an overview of the plans for the 680-8012 interchange. And I'll see if we can get that for one of our meetings in May.
Great. Other commissioners, any items you wish to bring up? Hearing none, I close this meeting of I adjourn this meeting to our April 27, 2022 meeting. Thank you for your attendance.